Senator Ted Cruz, how are you, sir?
I'm doing terrific. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. But, my audience, for the most part, we don't quite understand what the Senate is up to today, particularly the Republican majority in the Senate, given all the wheeling and dealing, and now it's quite obvious that this, in the end, so-called trade bill will include all kinds of left-wing Obama agenda items. Why you tell us how you wound up voting against it, and if you can, tell us why most of the Republicans voted for it.
Sure. So I voted against TPA today, and I wrote a long op-ed in Breitbart this morning explaining why. And as you know, I support free trade. I'm a long-time supporter of free trade. I campaigned on free trade in the state of Texas. However, there were really two things that drove me to oppose TPA today. The first was something that came out after the first vote on TPA, which is WikiLeaks released the text of a portion of the Trade and Services Agreement, which explicitly purports to change immigration laws of the signatory countries. Now, at the time TPA came up for a vote initially, Jeff Sessions introduced an amendment, and I introduced an amendment to add to TPA to make explicit that no trade deal can impact immigration law, and that anyone that attempted to impact immigration law wouldn't be subject to fast track. We didn't get those amendments. And based on this subsequent leak of the text of it, of a trade agreement attempting to do just that, I informed leadership that if they wanted my vote on TPA, they needed to pass the Cruz Sessions amendments to take immigration off the table forever on trade agreements. The second aspect that led me to vote no was the corrupt deals that we've seen that leadership pursued in order to get TPA passed, and in particular is a deal that by all appearances they cut to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. Now, as you know, Mark, the Export-Import Bank is a classic example of corporate welfare. It is hundreds of billions of dollars of loan guarantees that taxpayers give that benefit primarily a handful of giant corporations. Now, it's scheduled to expire on June 30th, and would be a tremendous victory. It should be a tremendous victory for Republicans to show we're not about cronyism, we're not about picking winners and losers, to defend the free market. Unfortunately, it now appears that Republican leadership cut a deal in order to get TPA through where they agreed to tee up a vote and allow the Export-Import Bank, that corporate welfare, to be reauthorized as well. And at the end of the day, it was simply too much, so I announced I would vote no, and I did vote no today.
And that's why you voted for it in the first place, because you believed that this was more of a vehicle for free trade or freer trade. And then you saw all these deals that were being cut, and you said, all right, that's enough, and I'm not going to vote for this. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. When the Senate initially took it up, I voted in favor of TPA. Now, not TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That hasn't been voted on. I haven't taken a position on it. It's still being negotiated. But TPA, as you know, is fast track, is the process for negotiating free trade agreements. And I initially voted in favor of that and then publicly spoke out in favor of it because over the last 80 years we've seen the only way that a president has been able to get free trade agreements negotiated is with fast track. And virtually every president since FDR has had fast track. And I informed leadership that if they publicly, number one, committed to allowing the Export-Import Bank to expire and stay expired, to end that corrupt Washington cronyism and deal-making. And number two, if Congress would pass the Cruz and Sessions amendments taking immigration off the table forever in trade agreements, that I would support it, but leadership did not accept my offer.
Well, this is really troubling to me and frustrating to me, and I think a lot of people in the audience, that leadership, which we don't view as leadership, I know you have to call them that, that the Republican leadership would be plotting with Barack Obama to get this through And obviously the question is, what's in it for Obama? Well, Obama's not a free market guy. Obama's not even a pro-capitalist guy. So why do we have these people? I'll tell you why I think, Ted Cruz, what we have here is crony capitalism and corporatism. That is, I think Republican leaders believe if they can get 12% of the pie, just 12%, they'll take it. Whatever Obama does. Am I missing something?
You're not, Mark, and unfortunately what we see today is another manifestation of what I call the Washington cartel. It is a corruption, it is a cartel of career politicians in both parties in union with the lobbyists on K Street. And it's the reason why 6 of the 10 wealthiest counties in America surround Washington, D.C., because this town is all about more and more power and money in Washington, and the working men and women, their lives being made harder and harder. And what we saw today is another example of government of the lobbyists, by the lobbyists, and for the lobbyists. And that's not what Republicans were elected to Congress to do.
Now, Ted Cruz, I want to ask you about this Associated Press and these photographs that were so appalling of a pistol aimed at your forehead. I mean, I know that you're going to probably make light of it, but that is so outrageous. You and I know full well if it were a liberal politician or, God forbid, the president or something like that, the sky would fall. And yet here you are, Ted Cruz and the Associated Press and their editors, and they put it out on the wire. It's such a disgrace. I haven't heard you comment on this.
Well, there's no doubt that if they had run the same photo and it had been Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, that the entire world would have recoiled in horror, and the editor who made the decision to run it would very likely have been fired, and there would have been a public apology. Instead, this is business as usual. As you know, the mainstream media, they are not objective reporters. They are hardcore leftists and partisans. They are Barack Obama's most important Praetorian Guard, and no one is more ready for Hillary than the mainstream media. So it is not surprising to see, I've kind of enjoyed some of the contrast of all the AP photos of Barack Obama with a halo of lights behind his head versus me with a giant gun pointed between my eyes, because that sums up their views of you and me and conservatives and, frankly, of Americans. They view hardworking men and women all across this country, people who believe in the values, the Judeo-Christian values, the free market, people who believe in the Constitution. They view us as ignorant rubes, and that's their hostility coming out, and it is the nature of who they are. They are partisans.
What do you make of all these things going on in the world and going on in this country that are extremely troubling? They're problematic for average Americans, whether it's jobs, whether it's immigration. We have this horrendous event of the slaughter of 9 wonderful human beings in a black church who were targeted because they're black. And here we are, within seconds, we're forced to debate gun control and the Confederate flag. Isn't it time we had a president who was a real statesman who would bring the country together and move us toward a united goal?
Mark, you're exactly right. Every one of us was horrified at the sickening shootings in Charleston, and it was an act of grotesque evil when this deranged man walked into the Emmanuel AME Church, and you and I are both people of faith. To imagine that he sat down and prayed with these men and women, prayed for an hour in church, and then promptly pulled out a gun and shot them. That is a manifestation of evil that is difficult to comprehend. And we both wish the president had used this opportunity to try to bring us together, to do what I've called for, what so many of us have called for, to say, let's pray for the families. Let's pray that we can come together. Let's pray that we can heal the racial divisions and wounds and hatreds and bigotry that still remain with some. It was incredible. It was breathtaking to watch the families of some of those murdered in the Emmanuel AME Church stand up and publicly call for forgiveness of this depraved killer. I mean, what an incredible manifestation of Christian forgiveness. I have to say, it took your breath away, and it was powerful, and that's what we should be focusing on, is coming together and bringing us together rather than having the president constantly seeking to make everything political, everything about dividing us along racial lines and class lines and gender lines and any line he can. We should have a president who unites us instead.
I just feel that the nation did, in fact, come together over this, as it has over other things, and we're way ahead of the Washington politicians and this president, and they hate it when we speak with one voice. They hate it when we stand shoulder to shoulder, because it doesn't serve their purposes on the left.
Everything is political from the left. So when you see a tragedy, from their perspective, it's an opportunity to push the same policy agenda they were pushing yesterday. It doesn't change what they're pushing. You know, as Rahm Emanuel famously said, you never want to waste a good crisis. That is a very cynical approach to politics and to life. And it's worth folks asking ourselves, are we more united today after 6.5 years of this presidency? Are we more divided? And sadly, when you have a president who constantly tears us apart, just this weekend, I was in Iowa, and I was traveling in California. I met one law enforcement officer, police officer, who had served over 2 decades as a police officer, and he said, I'm retiring because I cannot stand the animosity that is directed at law enforcement, at police officers who risk their lives. So I'm retiring. I'm getting out because I can't take it anymore. That is not the job of a president, to try to turn American citizens against each other. It's the job of a president to defend our common values, and that should start with the Constitution, which sadly this president disregards on a daily basis.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I just wanted to say this to you. The next president, assuming it's a conservative and a Republican, is going to have an enormous task undoing the damage this president has done and advancing his or her agenda. Am I right?
Mark, you are exactly right, but it also, we are poised for real change. Just like Jimmy Carter in the 1970s, we saw the same misery and stagnation and malaise, the same feckless and naive foreign policy, and that set the stage for the Reagan Revolution. We're seeing that again. Mark, in the last couple of months, we've had over 100,000 people come to tedcruz.org, contribute and support our campaign. We're seeing town halls. We did a town hall a few weeks ago in New Hampshire. We had 600 people come out in the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is not a big state. You don't get 600 people for just about anything. The next day, you'll love this, Mark, we did an event in Andover, Massachusetts, bright blue Massachusetts, had 650 people, right in the People's Republic of Massachusetts. And the great thing about it, Mark, just about every one of them, they were Reagan Democrats. They were Irish Catholic. They were working class. They were truck drivers and plumbers and school teachers. They were the people getting hammered. And I'll tell you, your listeners and men and women across America are waking up, and they're ready to change. And just like we saw Morning in America come in 1980, 2016 is going to be an election like 1980. We're going to win by painting in bold colors, not pale pastels. And people are waking up. I'm telling you, all over America, they're waking up.
All right, my friend, you be safe out there. That Associated Press photo, to me, that's just no joke. That is a very, very serious matter. So God bless you and be safe.
Well, thank you, my friend. God bless you as well, and keep speaking the truth no matter the cost, my friend.
All right, you take care.